150 years after slaves were freed in the U.S., 5 states will have slavery loopholes on their ballots this year in 2022. This doesn't involve slavery in the archaic sense that used to exist in the U.S., but rather the forced slave labor of incarcerated convicts. None of the proposals that are on these ballots would force immediate changes, though they would lead to legal challenges related to how states take advantage of prison labor. It's important to quickly illustrate how true slavery and prison labor are interconnected. While there has been scrutiny over prison labor in the past, the 13th Amendment contains a loophole that allows incarcerated prisoners to be used for slave labor, forced work with no pay. Not small amounts of pay, no pay. In fact, the 13th Amendment reads, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction." With the wording being what it is, former Confederate states used the loophole as a way to maintain slavery dynamics. Unjust measures were put into place, known as the Black Codes, and that would target black people and criminalize simple interactions such as talking too loudly. Once those offenders were locked up, they were then effectively slaves again to the system. Shifting back to the ballots as they are today, we are seeing an attempt to amend the 13th in an effort to change the language present so as not to perpetuate the cycle of forced unpaid slave labor. Nearly 20 states have constitutions that include language permitting slavery and involuntary servitude as criminal punishment. In 2018, Colorado was the first to remove the language from its founding framework by ballot measure, followed then by Nebraska and then finally Utah 2 years later. This November, this issue will be called out on the ballots for voters in Alabama, Louisiana, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont. The proposed language going before Tennessean voters more clearly distinguishes between the two. Quote, "Slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited. Nothing in this section shall prohibit an inmate from working when the inmate has been duly convicted of a crime," end quote. Considering all of this, there have also been concerns raised over how much it will cost to pay inmates for their labor. The people would incur the cost in state or federally funded prisons via tax dollars, while the corporations who own the privatized facilities would foot the bill in those locations. All that considered, many inmates already work for pennies on the dollar, which isn't being called into question, just a matter of eliminating the slave labor portion of the punishment. Alabama is asking voters to delete all racist language from its constitution and to remove and replace a section on convict labor that's similar to what Tennessee has had in its constitution. Vermont's proposed change would replace the current exception clause with language saying slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited in this state. Oregon's proposed change reveals its exception clause while adding language allowing a court or probation or parole agency to order alternatives to incarceration as part of sentencing. Louisiana is the only state so far to have its proposed amendment gain vocal opposition over concerns that the replacement language may make matters worse. The amendment would change the language to, quote, "Slavery and involuntary servitude are prohibited, but this does not apply to the otherwise lawful administration of criminal justice," end quote. Even one of the original sponsors of this tweak is concerned with the wording. Democratic Representative Edmund Jordan said he's urging voters to reject it in November. Language of the law matters. 150 years later, and the wording of the Constitution still allows slavery in various forms. So here are my thoughts on the matter to kick off the forum. First of all, where do we draw the line? Slavery is okay if... How do you finish that statement and feel comfortable in doing so? After 150 years, we are still debating language that exists in the U.S. Constitution as well as individual state constitutions. I'd say this is a pretty good indicator of how broken the system still is. There is a massive amount of information that can be explored stemming from this article. Content like police reform, judicial reform, and racial bias certainly aren't new topics here at the Freeform Project, and all are applicable. All of these concepts stem from the idea that prisons are still able to elicit slave labor from their prisoners. Many people would see this idea as a form of punishment. If so-and-so committed crime A, B, or C, then they should be forced to work with no pay. This idea feeds into yet another concept, which is that prison is meant to be only punishment. But should we be focusing on recidivism rate and reform? Can you expect reformation if you throw them into the slum of a prison and refuse to pay them, force them to barter or trade in illegal contraband or dealings as they were outside, where no legal income existed there either, and then release them back into society and expect them to be a functioning citizen? Again, this is a heavy topic and one that has so much to discuss. Any reform for the prison system is a complex matter. Without any hesitation, these concepts and ideas also call upon citizens and countries to look at themselves in the mirror and decide how they want to deal with and treat their criminal element. Do we seek justice or vengeance? Do we seek punishment or reform? It's imperative in my mind that language allowing slave labor should be voted on and eliminated from both the U.S. and individual state constitutions. The thoughts behind why it should be banned aren't so simple, because again, this is a complex issue, which is perfect because it requires discussion. So it's time for the call of action. Here we are once again at the end of another video. It's time for the forum to open up once more. Take to the comments section and explain your thoughts. How do you feel about this topic and why? I wanted to offer a special shout out as well to Wiser One Forever. Thank you very much. You engaged in a great thread with me last week on the video that was posted, and I hope to see more of the same this week. So please don't hesitate to reach out and get involved. Don't waste time. Finish the video and let's chat. And as always, think freely, discuss openly.